being water bodies and forest reserves. But over the years, it seems that these laws or legislative instruments that have been made available have not been utilized to the fullest. And so, in recent times, Ghanaians are crying for the country to declare a state of emergency. The President of the Republic, John Mahama, doesn't think that at this stage we need a state of emergency, and his government has decided rather to declare national security zones on areas that are prone to illegal mining. What does that even mean? What is the difference between a state of emergency and a declaration of national security zones for areas that are being mined? That is what we want to look at tonight. Hello, good evening, and welcome to Agenda. My name is Beatrice Adu, and tonight we want to look really at whether or not our problem is the law or a lack of action that has led us to where we are, even as the government prepares to meet some civil society organizations this Friday to talk about the way forward in dealing with the Galamsey menace. We're privileged to have on the panel with us Mr. Chachu Chikata. He's a renowned academic and lawyer. Good evening to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us once again on Agenda.
Good evening.
And I also do have on my left side Mr. Beatrice Adu, who is a renowned lawyer as well, former Attorney General and former High Commissioner to Canada. Good evening to you, sir. Thank you as well for joining us.
Good evening, and thanks for having me.
Of course, we do have on our extreme left as well, Mr. Francis Puku. He's a former National Security Minister. Sir, it's great to have you once again on Agenda.
Thank you. Good evening.
Let me remind you that this is not the first time we're talking about illegal mining. Exactly a year ago, on the 30th of September, I sat in this seat as the new phase of Agenda began, and we talked about illegal mining and other issues. I want you to watch this, and we'll come back to continue with our conversation. Good evening, and welcome to Agenda. My name is Beatrice Adu. So the chief knew that you were buying the land for illegal mining or Galamsey?
Yeah, they know. Even if we buy cocoa, some of them buy cocoa land. Yes, I have numbers I can give you to you. You can pretend it, and you say that you want to buy a land, you get it.
Unless there's cooperation between the chiefs, the assembly members, the MPs, the DCE, and the political parties, they all need to come to a consensus on the matter.
2022, when I took over, it came up to 8 billion, 8.6 billion. 2023, we managed to move that to 13 billion. In 2024, as of November...
Those were affected by the adjustments.
No, it cannot be affected by the adjustments because that's more than 100% increment. Tariff was not increased by 100%. Mr.
The tariff over the period that you are referencing.
No. Tariff for the period of 2023 was increased by 100%. Is that what you're saying?
No.
It wasn't. Let's not indulge in some intellectual dishonesty, because if we want to tell the people the truth,
can be verified. I mean,
yes, so verify it, unless
the tariff was adjusted.
Nobody's saying the tariff was not adjusted, but it wasn't adjusted by 100%.
No.
So if a company is able, look, let's give due when people have done well, and if we do not want to agree to people doing well, we don't agree to it.
Eduji is not telling us the truth.
I don't know what Eduji has said.
Eduji is saying that they are going to make sure that we review the systems to make sure petroleum products are cheap for Ghanaians.
Well, it is...
And he's the acting CEO of...
It's not a problem. It's not a problem. It's a very fine lawyer, fine policy.
But we noticed that was not sustainable because then debt was piling, the BDCs were bleeding, etc. But since Kwame Nkrumah time, up to John Mahama, that was the only time we had to bite the bullet and to tell Ghanaians that the reality on the ground is that you must buy the product at economic pricing.
There's been some major reduction in that expenditure. I also know that government has continued to seek foreign direct investment into the infrastructure development that they need to put in place and want to put in place to grow GDP. So we are seeing that going on. There seems to be some food security, and we've seen that reflect in the inflation rates coming down, especially for food. But still, it's an area of concern, and we must watch carefully.
To me, very satisfactory.
Yeah, but they also recognize that
the issue whether you have left your party is an issue of fact that has to be determined.
I agree with you.
And in the end, they did not determine that issue. That's why I said we're back to square one, because that is, in a sense, the bone of contention. Because that's why Afenyo Makin was disputing losing his position as majority leader. Because in his estimation, the vacation of seats has not happened. So he was going to the court for the court to determine that they have not vacated their seats.
So that was just a wrap. You call it a tip of the iceberg as regards how far we've come since the 30th of September 2024. I did tell you that I do have on the panel with me renowned lawyer and academic as well, Mr. Chachi Chikata. On my right side, I do have on my left side, former Attorney General, also Ghana's High Commissioner to Canada, and the extreme left, Mr. Francis Poku, who is a former National Security Minister. Once again, we're grateful that you've joined us. Remember that we're streaming live on 3FM and 92.7. Send us your comments and we'll read them back to you. I want to start with you, Mr. Chikota. I just talked about the fact that we started this whole thing with illegal mining. And it's been 1 year down the line. We are still grappling with this issue, now even debating as to whether or not we should declare a state of emergency. Why are we where we are?
Well, it's a shame indeed that we are where we are, but I think there's some hard facts that we've got to face. One is that clearly there are vested interests that are protecting the whole situation that we find ourselves in. There are vested interests which are trying to prevent any serious combating of what we publicly are recognizing is an untenable situation. I mean, you ask yourself, if we all proclaim that this is something terrible, why is it that there's still some people who are able to get away with, mining in forest areas, illegal, mining in various parts of the country? I mean, clearly, some of these people have felt protected politically, for instance. And again, I think we need to call a spade a spade. I mean, in the last 8 years, you look at the number of licenses that were granted for mining, including mining in these forest areas and so on. And it doesn't make sense. I mean, if you were saying a year ago, you were raising issues, alarms about this, why was it possible, even just before the handover to a new government that had been elected, in the December election, why was it possible for so many new licenses to be granted? Why? You ask yourself.
You talk about in the last 8 years, but you do understand that even before the last 8 years, Galamsey was so rampant.
I understand that. All I'm pointing out is that we are talking about continued Galamsey activities, even in the face of us all agreeing as a country that this is doing a lot of damage. Yes, it's been there, but the scale of it in the last year has been extraordinary. I mean, your colleagues, investigative journalists, have been, exposing some of these things. Everybody is talking about it. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that it's a new problem. I'm saying that the scale of the problem has been extraordinary, and it would not have reached these levels if it did not have the backing of powerful vested interests.
And I want to get your preliminary thought as well, Mr. Ayuko, because Mr. Chikota really is talking about how the situation worsened, for instance, in the last 8 years. And you bear witness to that LI 2462, which actually permitted mining in forest reserves, worsening the country's case.
Well, I wouldn't say worsening. This thing has been going on for some time. And we are all aware of the menace. Before I left this country in 2017 to take up my post, I knew that we were fighting with Galamsey. And in 2017 when we took over, there was this attempt at getting people to shift to do something, some other things like going into palm plantation and the rest. You know, the water bodies had already, you know, gone bad. And it was the talk of, it was a talk on the lips of everybody. We were all talking about Galamsey. If you situate it within the last 8 years, you create problems for yourself because this thing had been ongoing for some time, and then it makes the thing looks a little more like NDC MPP matter. But this is a matter that we say affects everybody, and we should do all we can to put a stop to it. So I wouldn't say that it worsened just because during that time it was. It ought not have started at all. And we knew of small-scale mining many years back in Akwitia and the rest. You know, so who gave them that audacity to go into, you know, water bodies and now start doing their whatever crude refineries in the water? Were they not people doing, weren't people doing some kind of small-scale mining many years back?
So the point about it being worsened is how many licenses were issued within that period as compared to previously?
Does it matter?
It does, because a lot of people get into the forest and other places.
Whether you have 10 licenses or 20 licenses, what they are doing there is wrong. So why was it that during their time, before 2017, why did we have Galamsey? If what we are saying is the position, why did we have Galamsey? We had it. It shouldn't be there, but it was there. That is what we want to look at. We must stop it, find a way of stopping it. That is all.
I'll come back to you, Ms. Ayikwe-Otu, but I want to get your preliminary thought as well, Mr. Puku. As a former national security minister, really, where you think we got it wrong?
I think we got it wrong because we have focused on assigning blame and also perpetually trying to find causes and scapegoats instead of resolving the problem. And we've come to a point when our very existence has become a very relevant issue. So in my own view, let us put the arguments and the blame game behind us. And as a nation threatened, we now have to deal with the safety of our people. We now have to deal with the extent of the problem. And in security terms, we are heading towards an insurgency because we are dealing with armed groups. We are dealing with a huge national budget if we are to address the problem. Not only trying to remedy the situation, but now we have to decide the budget that is needed to address the issue and remedy the damage done. And if we don't put this blame game behind us, we're going to lose our very existence, not just our lives, but on the way the international community are going to deal with us.
You see what's happening as a blame game issue because people feel that they are putting people on their toes. They are pointing fingers at those who are supposed to take proper responsibility and ensure that we didn't get to where we are now. You're calling that as blame game?
Yeah, because we have to concede that we've all done the wrong thing. That all political parties have a part to play in what has happened. So we have to be honest and say that he who is without sin, let him cast the first stone. And let me not go into details about what I know.
You can
But
tell us what you know.
I'm confident that all groups have to concede that we have not done well to our people. And the moment we come to this admission, I believe we'll focus on the resolution of the problem.
Mr. Chikata, I realize you are reacting to what Mr. Puku was saying.
Well, I'm not indulging in any kind of a blame game when I point out that the scale of Galamsey activity escalated in the last 8 years. That's just a fact. Let's face it. The scale of pollution of water bodies, the scale of destruction of forests, the scale of cocoa found being turned over to illegal mining activity escalated. People in the cocoa sector, reference this as part of the reason why Ghana's cocoa production dropped dramatically in the last couple of years. These are facts.
So this is what...
So let me be clear that I've not even begun to blame anybody yet. Of course, if there's blame to be, allotted to people, it has to be allotted. But I hadn't begun yet. All I had started talking about was the escalation. And it is that escalation which has led to the proliferation, for instance, of arms that you talk about. In the past, in times when people were doing small-scale mining in Akwete and so on, they didn't have the scale of arms, the sophistication. So you must be the first to recognize when one is talking about an escalation, that's where we are now. It's an escalated situation, and therefore, it is now a matter of national security. That's where we are now. And
we'll go into that bit about the declaration of a state of national security or declaring areas that are infested with illegal mining as national security zones. But I wanted to come to you very briefly, Mr. Adu, because the data shows that since 2017, over 2,000 mining and related licenses have been released. In addition to that, when you're talking about data in terms of times, it says in February 2017 to December 2018, only 7 licenses issued in 2017 and none in 2018. Now, after the ban was lifted, the number of licenses small-scale miners increased with over 900 licenses awarded by December 2018.
Why did we have to place a ban? What was happening before a ban was placed?
The question is about the licenses, not the ban.
I'm asking you, why was a ban placed? Didn't you situate it within that? That was after the ban was lifted, that more licenses were given. I'm asking you, didn't we have a problem that we were solving by placing a ban?
Yes, there was a problem.
And I'm saying, why are we talking about this escalation business? When we have a bad situation, then we went to West and the West.
No, so that...
It's already bad. There was something wrong. The waters are turned brownish and poisonous already.
So the import of the question is, knowing that it was already bad, did we have to issue more licenses for illegal mining to go on?
This is the thing that you do here, which creates problems for TV3. You see, you are now behaving as if you have taken a position that by all means there was an escalation during the time of the
Mr. Adu, that's not the point.
That's why I'm coming out clearly to tell you that when you do these things, that is when you create problems for yourself.
That is not the point.
We have argued, he has brought his point, I have answered him. You have taken it back and you are insisting that the escalation took place. I'm telling you, bad West. There was something the matter already which was happening in this country. And you cannot run away from that. That it is true.
That is a
that
fact.
There was Galamsey. Why are you interested in insisting that it got bad only during the time of MPC?
That is not the point
What will
I'm
you
making.
gain by doing that?
That is not the point
How
I'm making.
How are we going to fight Galamsey?
If you would kindly hear me out.
If you could kindly... Stop it if you want us to come and be part of your program.
Mr. Adu, if you would kindly hear me out, the point is not to... I think we've moved on from the bit about escalation. I was only saying...
You have gone back to say the same thing, to show the number of licenses that were given.
I was only giving you data.
After the ban was lifted, who imposed the ban? Who imposed the ban?
It was the
what was
government
the
then.
ban for? Was it no MPP who was doing that?
It was to deal with the
Let us
problem.
discuss this matter and stop this escalation business.
I would move on, but the point I'm trying to make is that I wasn't insisting on escalation of the case. I was only giving you data based on what I said earlier, although we have moved on. But I want us to move on to the legal bit, because again, the question is that we have a lot of, legal frameworks that are supposed to be protecting our environment. If you look at the Act 703, which I mentioned earlier, when you look at even at the 2016 one, a number of them that will not be able to have time to go through. Mr. Chikata, that's why I'm coming back to you as a lawyer as well. People argue that it is not necessarily about the laws we have, because when it comes to the laws, we have perhaps adequate to protect our environment from degradation and destruction. But it is the fact that perhaps the law is overrated, because the law in itself, without action, cannot help solve the problem.
No, I would agree.
How do you...
I would agree with that. And I think, a lot of the time, people talk as if once you make some legal adjustments here and there, once you declare a state of emergency or whatever, you'll solve the problem. That's far from the case. And I would completely agree that, we shouldn't focus just on laws. We should focus on the nature of the problem. And in my view, that's where vested interests come. You see, if you have a lot of people who feel that there is value in something and who are going after it by hook or by crook, they will try to protect the position that they're in every way possible. So that makes it more difficult for the enforcement action. We lost a whole military major, because the military were put to work in relation to a situation involving illegal mining. Now, so we can't run away from the fact that you have these vested interests. And if we are not willing to assess the graduation of vested interest from one period to another, and it's not just about political parties in power that we should be interested in, but even if we talk about it in terms of periods, we have to identify the way these vested interests protect their positions, which makes it more difficult to enforce. So enforcement is a problem. And it becomes more problematic when you have these vested interests very, sort of entrenched in powerful positions.
We have to identify the source of the vested interest. I know you've been monitoring the situation as well, and I'll come back to you very shortly, Mr. Ikotu. What have you yourself identified, which is why we are where we are?
Well, it's quite clear to me. When you look at the award of licenses, which Mr. Ikotu doesn't want you to talk about, the reality is that a lot of licenses were awarded to, people who were closely connected with those in power, those who had the opportunity, those who had the authority to grant licenses. That's the reality. We can't run away from it.
Mr. Ikotu, how do you respond to that question about the fact that the law in itself cannot deal with the problems that we have? I've just gone through some of the acts that we've had. Some of them amended 2016 and all of that. And so how do we combine action with the law to ensure that we deal with the problem as we should?
Well, clearly, you know it's a political will. People were talking plenty during the campaign. They were campaigning in prose only to come and rule in poetry. And they've now been giving us reasons why certain things ought not to be done. I followed them closely, and I was satisfied that they had no plans to fight Galamsey. In 2020, when the MPP was fighting Galamsey, there was a leader who said, even if they jail you, we will come and release you. We lost in all the Galamsey constituencies.
You're referring to former President John Mahama?
Yes. And then I recall also seeing some group of Galamseyers going to buy pickups to give to a party to do their campaign.
Which party was that?
You are in the media, so find out. So what I'm saying is that in this time round two, I followed carefully. And what our current president used to say is that we've got to balance the jobs with environmental degradation. The people are there who are looking for their daily bread. We cannot just stop them. So I knew that nothing was going to happen when they take over. You have sound bites of leading figures in the NDC who were shouting about repealing a certain LI. They have come.
I just mentioned it, LI 2462.
They are now talking about amending it. So for me, I am satisfied. And that's why I'm telling you, stop this blame game and saying that
I don't think what I did was a blame game. And we've moved on from that, Mr. Ikwetu.
But it's been a problem all over. All over. And those who were shouting at the top of their voices, declare a state of emergency, repeal LI, so and so, they are now in office. They haven't done that. Will you want to talk about it? Would you want to talk about those things?
Yes, we should.
Mr. Poku, again, and Mr. Ikwetu has just taken us into that space where Ghanaians are calling for a declaration of a state of emergency. And the president says that we haven't exhausted all the processes that there are, and therefore he doesn't find the need for us to declare a state of emergency. You're a former national security minister. If you can tell us really the difference between what the president has given us now, which is declaring those areas as national security zones, and a real declaration of a state of emergency?
Well, the public, understandably, are very desperate. And when you are desperate, you are looking for solutions. So the public outcry, in my own view, is the loss of confidence in the ability of all political parties to solve the problem. You see, we've always, again, we are focusing on what went wrong. But where we are now, the public are looking for answers. We have had delayed actions. We have delayed the corruption of those that they expected to protect them, their safety. And we don't need to go into what is happening. The causes are very open. Food security has been very much endangered. Our cocoa and gold, natural resources, major source of income, are threatened. So there are many reasons why the public wants something and is getting to a demand for a state of emergency. But at the end of the day, when you grant this state of emergency, who are the tools for implementation? It's the security agencies. So now the president hopefully is meeting the faith groups and other civil society organizations on Friday. And I believe that the president, who must be privy to national security reports, is going to share some of the challenges. And some of the challenges are the extent of the problem, the military preparedness to tackle the issue, the extent of the nation that might be the target of any such declaration. But quite clearly, it's well established that the safety of the people are endangered as a requirement for, which is a requirement for emergency action. But I think the public outcry may be a response that is coming from desperation. And I believe that when the president is able to communicate the fact to civil society groups, they might be able to reconsider.
So
because he may be in position to information that is not available to the public.
So let me get your thought. Based on your submission, are you saying that it is the right time for the president to declare
state of emergency
instead of the national security zones he's categorized those areas?
Well, the devil is in the implementation. And the president being privy to intelligence will be able to consider the issues involved, will be able to have briefing with selected members of society, and among the problems will be given the challenges that are facing national security. Are we able to deploy security personnel? And then, in what measure are we going to do so? Because apart from 2 regions, the rest of the regions have suffered from Galamsey. So you will need to assess the situation, given the reports available to him.
So I will come back to you on that, and I'll read a bit of really what it means to declare a state of emergency as spelled out in the Emergency Powers Act 1994, Act 472. We'll go into that, but I want you, Mr. Chikata, to respond briefly to what Mr. Ayiko Otu said earlier, that indeed before the 2024 general election, there were officials, top officials of the NDC, including the now sitting president, who were, making the pronouncement that they were going to be very tough on illegal mining. In fact, there's an article which was published exactly on the 9th of September 2025, where the president met some religious leaders and said that, yes, dealing with Galamsey would be a formidable challenge, but it demands strong political will. The concerns of a lot of people is that, yes, you're just 9 months into power, but you don't seem to have had the strong will enough to deal with this situation head on, as you made us believe ahead of the 2024 general election.
Well, I'm not a spokesperson.
Certainly, but
I'm not a spokesperson for any of the people who may have made utterances. But I want us to just assess the facts that are a matter of public knowledge. Those facts include the reality that has just been explained, that virtually all over Ghana, there's illegal mining activity. So there is a scale of the problem which, has to be taken into consideration. Now, in taking that into consideration, I mean, Mr. Poku mentioned the availability of military or other personnel, security personnel to cope with the situation and so on. But you see, I think that is looking at it too narrowly from the perspective of just enforcement action, because something of this nature can't be dealt with by just deploying troops or by just, and that's why in my mind, if you just started, I mean, it would be the easiest thing for the president to say, I'm declaring a state of emergency because of Galamsey. That's a proclamation he can make under the constitutional and the statutory provisions.
Yes.
But even after you make that declaration, how are you going to implement your enforcement capabilities? And what is the capacity that you have, both in terms of even the state of the economy that we have, the resources that are available to the government, to be able to deploy in that manner? But I think there's an even more severe problem that we should deal with. You see, declaring a state of emergency, and you will notice that in the Constitution, emergency powers are dealt with in the chapter that has to do with human rights. When you declare a state of emergency, it actually gives the power to the president to do things which in the normal course he would not have the ability to do. So I think that people should be very careful in some of these demands about a state of emergency and so on. Because you ask yourself, do you really want the executive, the president, to have unusual powers that he can use, in respect of a state of emergency? In my view, honestly, I can't see a real justification for just making a declaration of a state of emergency and assuming that through that you will have satisfied people that you're giving urgent consideration to Galamsey.
So let me read that a bit of the Emergency Powers Act 1994, Act 472. And when you look at Article 31 and 32 of the 1992 Constitution, you seem to have similar writings as well. So just a bit of that. Section 1 says, declaration of a state of emergency. The President may, acting in accordance with the advice of the Council of State, by proclamation published in the Gazette, declare that a state of emergency exists in Ghana or in any part of Ghana. Section 2 says Parliament has to be informed, and then Parliament shall within 72 hours after being so notified decide whether the proclamation should remain in force or should be revoked, and the President shall act in accordance with the decision of Parliament. And it says Section 3, talking about the duration of a state of emergency, says 1. A declaration of a state of emergency shall cease to have effect at the expiration of a period of 7 days, beginning with the date of publication of the declaration, unless before the expiration of that period it is approved by resolution passed for that purpose by a majority of all the members of Parliament. And then when you look at the subject to the subsection 2 of Section 4, declaration of state emergency approved by resolution of Parliament shall continue in force until the expiration of a period of 3 months, beginning with the date of it being so approved. You talked about the consequences of declaring a state of emergency, and I just wanted to just go through that, and I'll go back to Mr. Francis Poku, because you seem to disagree with those who are asking for the declaration of a state of emergency because perhaps they may not necessarily know the effects it may have when indeed that is done. Okay, I will have to look for that, but it is also within that. It says where a person is restricted or detained pursuant to declaration of a state of emergency, the following provision shall apply. So it restricts movement of people, deployment of security agencies and all of that. But again, I was referring to Article 31, which really tells you that when there is a natural disaster or something that the country finds as a crisis, and it deprives people of their right to certain amenities, then there should be that declaration of a state of emergency. So you wouldn't agree with what Mr. Francis Poku said, that indeed this has become an existential threat. And looking at even what our Constitution says, we should be able to do that.
No, it can be an existential threat, but the way to deal with an existential threat is not necessarily to declare a state of emergency, because when you declare a state of emergency, it is to enable you to do something which you would not otherwise have been able to do. So if you can deploy, troops or whatever, or if you can engage community, if you can engage, the nation as a whole, if you can mobilize community support against Galamsey, but there have been important things done. Look, let's not behave as if nothing has been done in the effort to deal with Galamsey. There has been a decisive intervention in relation to some of this mining in forest areas, for instance. There's been an end brought to some of the activities. It's been visible. People who were engaged in it have been stopped. There has been a process of seizing excavators and so on for people undertaking mining in protected forest areas, which they were not entitled to do. And, there's a process now, for instance, of trying to register the excavators, ensure that you can track them wherever they may be deployed and so on. So, steps are being taken. Of course, the society rightly believes that the steps are not sufficient, but they are not sufficient because of the scale of the problem and because of the way that some people want to keep it going. If you have a problem which, only a few people are interested in protecting, it's easier to focus on attacking the problem around those few people. But if you have a problem which a lot of people are engaged in creating for you, then you really got to sit back and make sure that the measures that you're taking are going to be effective. It's not a matter of just declaring a state of emergency.
So when you say that the way some people, and I'll be coming back to you, Mr. Ikutu, very shortly, and Mr. Francis Foucault as well, when you say that we are not perhaps seeing progress, just putting it in my own words, because some people want to keep it happening, would you say that some of those people are currently in government? Because again, Mr. Ikutu also talked about the revocation of LI 2462, and it looks like the government has been dancing about the bush regarding revoking this. Let me just read a bit of that to you.
Well,
Section
I mean, I've looked at LI 2462 very carefully. And I mean, the issues about LI 2462 are, again, I mean, not central, frankly, to the dealing with galamsey all around the country. The forest areas, the forest reserve problem is, again, a heightening of the problem. I won't say escalation so as not to upset anybody. But, I mean, the fact that people can even get into forest reserves just shows you that this has now got to just an extraordinary level. But again, we have been witness to, a forestry commission led by somebody who could, with impunity, talk about areas of the forest being, his and his generations thereafter. So,
you mean Sir John, the late Sir John?
Well, I mean, no names mentioned, but he who the cup fits should wear it. But look, I feel that the public is entitled to ask questions of everybody, to ask for accountability, whether it's today's president or yesterday's president. Accountability is important in this task because you're dealing with a situation in which you're calling on the highest officers in the land to take drastic action. But you can't also just demand from them that they take an action which seems drastic on the surface. You declare a state of emergency is drastic. But in fact, it may be counterproductive to the solution that you need because just giving, powers to a president to be able to limit the rights of people and so on is not always the best way to go. And I have to say that I think sometimes people should be careful what they wish for.
Ms. Aikwetu, how do you respond briefly to what Mr. Chikata is saying? And then we'll go into the LI 2462.
Well, this is what they are saying for now. And so I'm only hearing a very familiar, response. That was not what they told us before they came. And that's why I was asking you to probe them. This is not what they told us. They knew all this. They had their legal experts. They have their security advisors. They had everybody in place since they came. They have made appointments to so many offices where all these experts can be found. So at the time they were shouting that we have to create a state of emergency, declare a state of emergency, declare a state of emergency. They didn't know what they were talking about. We have to repeal LI 24 whatever. Didn't they know?
2462.
2462. Didn't they know? They knew all that. Today they are in power. They have fooled the people. The people have voted for them because there are only two sins that I see in Ghana now. Either you are unable to fight galamsey or your exchange rate is running, that nobody has confidence in your city. These are the two sins. So let them walk that path. Let them continue to do what they are doing until the elections come. And the people will know that you took us for a ride. You did nothing about galamsey. Your people have gone there, they are doing it. You did not repeal the LI, and your city is running again, and now we are at 60, we are at 70, and we are maybe 80. So let them continue. Let them continue the path.
I think you're living in a different country from the one that most people are living in.
I'm glad you talk about
today.
I'm glad the city is now around 12 Ghana
today.
Okay.
I never said to you. I said, let them continue the lies. You let them continue. And when the city starts getting to 70 and the galamsey becomes worse, then they will see the length their length of what they have come to do. So let them continue to do it.
Mr. Ikwetu, before I come to you, Mr. Francis Poku, I want to ask you this question, staying with the LI 2462. And it was the MPP government, and again, let me just make it clear, the caveat here that this is not to make it an MPP-NDC conversation, not at all, but it's based on the statement you've made, that they have failed to revoke an airline that the MPP government brought. Again, if you look at the airline, it gives permits to people who have license to drill and to do all sort of things within forest reserves. Yet, if you're looking at the Minerals and Mining Act, the amended one, Act 2019, Act 995, just to read it very briefly to you, because you're a former Attorney General and I believe you understand that. The 6 says, a person who fabricates, manufactures or uses a floating platform or any other equipment for mining, dredging, or any other mode of mining for purpose of obtaining minerals in or along the banks of a natural water body, including a river, stream, water course, the exclusive economic zone, and any area covered by the territorial sea or continental shelf of the Republic of Ghana, commit an offense and is liable on summary, and then it goes on to spell the sanctions. Are you able to tell us perhaps the reasoning behind the establishment or the promulgation of LI 2462 when looking at this, it's clearly against Act 703 and what I just read, 995.
Well,
that now the current government is being forced to revoke.
I wouldn't say that any license given to somebody to go and mine is necessarily to go and engage in illegal mining.
So why are we asking the government to revoke, including yourself? You just said that.
You
if that wasn't the case.
That we now have escalation. So we are in a situation of desperate actions which call for desperate measures. So if they are telling us that there is escalation now, let them do what is required of them.
But it's not the NDC that is asking for the revocation. CSOs in environment are equally asking for the revocation of the airline.
Are we not Ghanaians? Are they better Ghanaians than we are? We are all Ghanaians. We are all seeing the problem. Today we are being told that you can't just take any contemporary and decide to eat because there are difficulties with it. And that is gone beyond even Ghana because we send our food outside and our people go and buy. Go and live there. You see how many people go to Ghana shop to go and buy Ghanaian food all the time. And these are the very things we are exporting to them. So we are all seeing the situation is becoming desperate. Bring in desperate measures, and you are telling us you don't know how to do that. Has anybody told you to go and just kill people?
Mr. Akoto, you haven't answered the question.
Which question?
About what went into the promulgation
Whatever
of
went
LI
in, it was passed. It was passed.
So you don't see anything wrong with the LI 2462?
What is wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with it.
It was passed, and I've told you, you see, you are creating the impression that they ask people to go and do illegal things. Not necessarily. And even this number of licenses you are talking about, how many people take the license and actually use it? Some people are going to do business with their license.
I'm coming to you.
People go and do businesses with their license. What is that to show that they themselves are even going to get involved in anything? Or even if you have 10 licenses and you have 100 licenses, in terms of damage, if those who have only 10 are causing more damage, would you just look at the number and say that because there are 100 licenses, therefore what? We have to look at where the problem is.
Mr. Francis Poku, and I'll come back to you, Mr. Ikwetu. Would you admit that the national security, an office that you occupied, has failed us woefully? Because if you look at the Act, it tells you that we must have regional security councils, district security councils. All of these are supposed to be working with the national security to ensure that we deal with this problem from the very local areas. So you would admit that your office failed?
Well, we are at a point when we have to start making admissions. We have failed as a nation. And I think that should be the focus. It hasn't gone well. So at this stage, let us move forward. Let us address the concerns of our people. Let us address the concerns of the international community. They are worried about our environment. They are worried about our exports. Our people, there are real cases, health cases that are very disturbing. And when we embark on this kind of debate, the public get distressed. They want to hear from such discussions that we have a way forward.
Yes, we'll go into the...
And together, we need executive judicial actions to resolve the problem. We need stakeholder involvement. So we are in a very serious situation. And if we are not careful, through Galamsey, the nation may sink. It's going to disturb our revenues. There are serious military actions that are needed. And when I took over 2001, it wasn't an issue. Why? Because the situation we inherited necessitated a bit of protection of concessions actions. There were no near problems like Galamsey, near rivers, and the pollution we have seen. So we have to concede. That's as a nation, there's something going well. And I'm looking for stakeholder engagements. I'm suspecting that, as His Excellency the President has invited the faith groups, we would have the political parties conceding that these actions, negative actions, have taken place during all regimes.
So the import of the question is that you cannot, they say that you cannot solve a problem until, or you can't find solution until you know that there's a problem. So how do you deal with the fact that you have regional security councils, the heads, including DISEC, and chiefs being complicit in it? You need to identify that to be able to deal with the problem.
We can always go back to the drawing board. You see, let us concede mistakes. We haven't done well, and all parties must concede. All parties must accept that their own people are involved in the Galamseys. So we must, and His Excellency the President is the first to acknowledge, when we look at the invitation he's extending to the groups, I'm sure he's trying to find a solution. Let us come together, you see, and identify the corruption even among our youth. There are young men now who are better off in Galamsey areas. They are getting between 40,000 and 70,000 a week. So when you refer to alternative employment, you cannot even employ them. So if government strategy even is to find alternative jobs, it cannot be done.
So let me ask you this question, two questions in one. How do you, and then I'll come to the rest of the panel for our final comment. How do you expect the National Security Secretariat right now, together with other security agencies, to deal with the problem, and even the modalities that should surround this declaration of national security zones in areas that we see illegal mining take place?
Well, the national security, that is the intelligence wing, will be communicating concerns on the ground. These reports may not easily be accessible to the ordinary person, but they are able to inspire executive actions. But we also have the enforcement side of national security. And national security is a stakeholder engagement. It is bringing together all parties that will be supporting various executive actions. So they will be working behind the scenes, and I'm very confident that given the expertise of those we have in the services, they will be communicating their concerns.
Let me get your final thought, Mr. Chikata, on this, and I'll get that of Mr. Ayokoto as well.
Well, I mean, I think it is important that the president's clarity about a political will to confront the situation has been communicated. And that's why I said earlier, people should be held accountable. So the president should be held accountable for his declaration of a commitment to confront the problem, regardless of whether somebody alleges that somebody in his party or somebody in some other party is involved. The president says he wants to confront the situation. So starting from there, we know that there is a certain leadership commitment. But leadership commitment is not only about the president. Leadership commitment is also at the level of the communities themselves. For instance, chiefs and, other sort of local leaders, have a certain stake in the situation we're dealing with. It's not for people in Accra all the time to pretend that they know everything that's happening on the ground. Even if the intelligence agencies pick up information and relay it, still, the people on the ground in the communities must also have a certain commitment to the fight. And in that regard, I completely agree with the observation made that when we are talking about alternative jobs and so on and so forth, we've got to ensure that these young people can feel attracted to the alternatives. Some of these areas were areas where cocoa used to be farmed.
Indeed.
But they were moved to what seemed to be a more lucrative, gold mining sort of opportunity. So the issue is, how are we going to encourage some of these young people who find an easier route, through gold and doing the illegal thing? How are we going to encourage them to do differently? Now, that encouragement cannot all come from just a central leader.
And say, if you could wrap up in like 30 seconds for us.
That encouragement has to come from their families and groups around them. So, I mean, it's a nationwide mobilization.
Nationwide mobilization, Mr. Aikoyi, to your final thought.
We give power to a party who has a leader. They told their stories about what they were coming to do. We are now in a situation which appears to be very desperate, and desperate situations demand desperate measures. That would be my conclusion on the matter.
Desperate situations demand desperate measures. Thank you very much, Mr. Aikoyi, lawyer, former Attorney General, also former High Commissioner to Canada. We've also had with us Mr. Chachu Chikata, renowned lawyer and academic, and of course, Mr. Francis Poku as well, former National Security Minister. Let me just read about two of your comments. And Kwabena Ansa says, okay, so let me read that of Charles Kumsin, who says, I think Mr. Aikoyi Otu. Okay, so a lot of personal messages, but thank you so much for sending in your messages to us. My name is Beatrice Adu. Thank you so much for joining us on Agenda tonight. Join us again next week.